If you love epic HFY sci-fi, tales where humanity defies impossible odds against alien empires, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the next story. Now let's dive into tonight's tale. The galaxy burned with the light of conquered worlds, each star system a testament to the merciless hand of the Vel'thrak Dominion. From the warforges of their homeworld to the farthest reaches of their empire, fear was the currency of their reign. High Warlord Cras there stood upon the command dais of his flagship, the obsidian-armored dreadnought Bloodfang, and surveyed a holographic map littered with the ruins of subjugated civilizations. His eyes, narrow slits of molten gold, gleamed with the satisfaction of another victory. Yet beneath the triumph lay something colder, certainty. Certainty that no rival existed in the infinite dark. Crasthar embodied the Dominion's creed: strength alone dictated worth. Born in the pits where younglings tore one another apart for the right to live, he had clawed his way to supremacy with a savagery that left scars across his scaled hide. His voice, deep and rasping, carried a weight that silenced entire war councils. To him, conquest was not ambition, it was nature. He believed the Vel'thrak were not just rulers of the stars but destiny made flesh. At his side stood Commander Valor, leaner and sharper, with a predator's grace and a strategist's mind. Unlike his warlord, he did not revel in brute displays of power but in the subtle satisfaction of a perfectly executed campaign. Where Crasthar was storm, Valor was blade. Together they had reduced empires to ash and left once proud species huddling in servitude. Tonight's feast would be no different. Behind them, chronicler Rasven etched runes into his living scroll, a creature bred for memory. He recorded not with ink but with blood, carving the tale of Vel'thrak's supremacy so future generations would never doubt their eternal dominance. Yet as his quill scratch echoed in the chamber, his mind lingered on a dangerous thought. Stories grew brittle when repeated too often. Victories without resistance blurred into monotony, and even the strongest legends risked becoming hollow. On the viewing deck below, the latest victims lay in defeat. A planet whose name was already forgotten smoldered, its surface split with molten scars from orbital bombardments. The survivors, ragged, broken, had been rounded into pens, awaiting transport as slaves. Crasthar looked upon them without interest. They were prey no different than 1,000 others. Weakness defined them, and weakness had no place in his universe. Another hunt completed, Valor remarked with a satisfied growl. These creatures broke faster than the last. As they all do, Crasthar replied. His claws curled around the hilt of his war axe. The stars will remember us as the end of prey. None shall resist us. Rasven hesitated, his quill hovering over the scroll. His scaled brow furrowed as he chose his words. High Warlord, forgive a chronicler's caution. Yet I record not only your deeds but the whispers that spread beyond our borders. There are tales, fleeting, unproven, of a species in the outer fringe. They do not flee. They do not kneel. They fight. The chamber darkened with silence. Crasthar turned, his gaze heavy as stone. Whispers. Nothing more. All prey struggles before the slaughter. That is their nature. Valor's jaw tightened. He had heard the same rumors during the campaign's advance, stories from defeated vassals who spoke of men with fire in their veins. Creatures that lacked the Dominion's scale, claws, or star-forged weapons, yet who fought with a desperation unlike anything the galaxy had witnessed. To him, it sounded like myth designed to kindle false hope among the broken. Still, a sliver of unease slid beneath his skin, sharp as a blade. Rasven pressed carefully, each word deliberate. Perhaps. Yet the tales say they are unyielding. That when their settlements burn, they rise from the ashes fiercer than before. They call themselves humans. The warlord barked a low, guttural laugh. Humans? A name fit for prey animals. Let them come. Their defiance will end as all others have. The Dominion feasts on resistance. It makes the kill sweeter. Though Crasthar's confidence rang absolute, Rasven marked the moment in his scroll with heavier strokes, as though carving into fate itself. He had chronicled victories without number, but never had he inscribed a word that lingered in his bones the way humans did. The syllables carried weight he could not explain, a promise of something that might unravel the very legends he was bound to preserve. The stars shifted as the Bloodfang leapt toward its next conquest, and the war council dispersed with laughter and boasts. Crasthar retired to his throne, content in the unbroken rhythm of domination. Yet beyond the Dominion's borders, where their maps labeled the void as wilderness, ships of fragile metal carried men who had never known submission. Men who, when cornered, did not cower. Men who bit back. For now the predators slept certain of their rule. But certainty was a fragile crown, and the galaxy was vast enough to hide the spark of a firestorm yet to come. The mining colony of Eos 4 drifted on the fringe of mapped space, a modest cluster of domes and steel spires clinging to the barren rock. To the Vel'thrak, it was nothing more than prey fattened in the dark, another nameless outpost to be plundered and crushed beneath their claws. To the men who called it home, it was fragile but theirs, carved from stone with sweat and sacrifice. Captain Marcus Hale stood at the colony's outer perimeter, his weathered features hardened by years of war long before exile to this frontier. Once a soldier, now a leader of miners and families, he carried authority not by rank but by the quiet certainty in his voice when all else faltered. The first sight of the alien raiders came as distant flashes across the black. A small Vel'thrak scouting vessel descended like a shard of night, bristling with weapons meant to cow resistance before it even began. To the Dominion, such shows of force had always been enough. Hale, however, did not flinch. He had lived long enough to know that submission meant death as surely as defiance, and if his people were to perish they would do so fighting. Sergeant Elias Ward arrived at his side, armor pieced together from salvaged plating and mining exocets. A scar cut across his cheek, a souvenir of battles he rarely spoke of, though his reckless grin betrayed eagerness where others felt fear. "Looks like wolves circling sheep," Ward muttered, squinting at the descending ship. "Only this time the sheep have teeth." "Teeth aren't enough," Hale replied evenly. "We'll need claws." His gaze swept the colony, where men armed with drills, cutters and scavenged rifles waited. They were not soldiers, yet their eyes carried the same fire Hale had once seen in comrades on battlefields long forgotten. Doctor Adrian Cole stood apart from the fighters, thin and bespectacled but no less vital. His mind worked like a forge, calculating weaknesses in alien anatomy from the fragments they had recovered in earlier skirmishes. He carried no weapon save a medkit and a data slate filled with sketches and notes, yet in his careful eyes burned the same defiance as those who would stand on the barricades. "Their biology isn't built for resilience," he said quietly, joining Hale and Ward. "They rely on fear. Break that and you break them." The alien craft descended, its hull gleaming obsidian beneath the colony's floodlights. The Vel'thrak disembarked with the casual arrogance of hunters stepping into a corral. Their leader sneered at the sight of miners aiming crude weapons, mistaking desperation for weakness. He barked demands in a guttural tongue, a call for surrender that echoed across the comms. Hale listened, then answered not with words but with the thunder of a repurposed mining charge detonating beneath the raiders' landing zone. The ground convulsed, fire lit the sky, and the predators shrieked as half their number were torn apart before their hunt had even begun. What followed was chaos, but chaos tilted in humanity's favor. Ward led a squad in a flanking rush, his laughter carrying over the gunfire as though the fight were a sport. Men with cutters sliced through alien armor. Explosives fashioned from fuel cells tore breaches into their ranks. Hale moved with precision, issuing orders that turned scattered civilians into a coordinated defense. Even Cole, darting through the battlefield, marked fallen Vel'thrak with calm detachment, storing every observation of their wounds for later study. The Vel'thrak, for all their size and ferocity, faltered. They had never faced prey that struck back with such savage invention. Their fear tactics collapsed beneath the weight of human ingenuity and stubbornness. By the time their commander fell, crushed beneath a mining loader piloted by a desperate colonist, the survivors were already retreating, their guttural snarls laced with disbelief. When silence finally settled over the colony, the men stood amid wreckage and smoke, bruised and bloodied but alive. Ward leaned on his rifle and spat at the scorched earth. "Invincible, my ass." Cole knelt by the alien dead, brushing his fingers over the scaled hide. "They bleed easily," he murmured, half to himself. "Too easily for predators who claim to rule the stars." Hale looked toward the void where the surviving raiders had fled. He knew they would return and in greater numbers. But tonight's victory was more than survival, it was proof. Proof that humanity would not be hunted like cattle, proof that fear could be turned back against those who wielded it. The colony had shown teeth, and the galaxy's predators had tasted the bite. Far across the stars, news of the skirmish would reach the ears of Krasthar and his dominion. To them, it would seem a trivial loss, a scratch upon an empire forged in blood. Yet to the men of Eos 4, it was the spark of something greater, a fire no predator had yet seen. Hale stood in the dim glow of burning wreckage and felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. They had survived the first strike. Now came the war. The void became a battlefield, not of empires clashing with fleets of perfection, but of men improvising with desperation and fury. The Vel'thrak expected another swift extermination when their armada descended upon the scattered human colonies. Instead, they met something alien to their understanding, a species that thrived not in order or dominance but in chaos, bending the rules of war until they shattered. Captain Marcus Hale commanded from the bridge of the Resolute, a vessel stitched together from stolen alien hull plating and the steel bones of a mining hauler. Around him, a patchwork fleet held formation, human ingenuity binding them tighter than any doctrine. He studied the holographic map where crimson icons swarmed toward his fragile line. "They want fear," he said quietly. "Give them madness." Sergeant Elias Ward answered with a grin sharp as a blade. His shuttle, little more than a rusted transport reinforced with scavenged armor, bristled with improvised launchers and boarding hooks. He had made himself the spear of every reckless assault, his legend spreading among the colonies as the Mad Dog of Terra. To Ward, terror was not something to endure but to wield. He thrived on the sight of Vel'thrak captains recoiling as his boarding teams stormed their decks, magnetized boots clanging against alien metal, plasma cutters and axes tearing through what had once been considered impregnable. "Let them think us beasts," he told his men before each raid. "Beasts bite harder than kings." Doctor Adrian Cole, ever the observer, transformed each skirmish into a study. He collected fragments of alien tissue, monitored their reactions under duress, and noted with precise clarity that the Vel'thrak mind fractured under sustained resistance. They had never known prey that did not break. They were conditioned to dominate through spectacle, shriek, burn, and feast. But when prey refused to cower, when it struck back with equal ferocity, the predators hesitated. Cole's conclusions became weapons as vital as guns, guiding Hale's strategies with the knowledge that terror could flow in reverse. The war raged across asteroid fields and abandoned trade routes, every encounter a clash of brute power against merciless improvisation. Humans mined asteroids and flung them like shrapnel into enemy lines. They turned derelict stations into traps wired with explosives, luring Vel'thrak vessels into labyrinths where death waited in silence. When supplies ran thin, they stripped their own ships for parts, creating weapons that should not have worked yet somehow did. Every victory carried a cost in lives, but with each sacrifice the legend of human defiance grew, spreading whispers through the galaxy that the predators had met their match. Krasthar, far from the front, listened to the reports with simmering fury. Each loss was explained away as anomaly, sabotage, or incompetence, yet the pattern gnawed at him. Prey was never supposed to win. Prey was never supposed to be unpredictable. Yet these humans fought with a will that defied logic, a madness that could not be crushed. His commander, Velor, spoke of adapting strategies, tightening discipline, overwhelming them with sheer numbers. Krasthar snarled in response. Numbers mean nothing against vermin that refuse to die. Still, he felt the crack in certainty widening, and in the hollow of his chest grew the first seed of doubt. On the front lines, Hale shouldered the weight of victories that felt more like survival. Every decision meant lives lost, and yet the colonies rallied behind him as though he carried destiny itself. His voice across the comms became the pulse of their resistance, measured, steady, unyielding. To his men he was proof that humanity could endure the storm. Yet in his private moments, staring at the fractured hull of the Resolute, he wondered how long endurance would suffice against an empire built on centuries of conquest. Ward, for his part, needed no such reflection. He lived for the charge, for the chaos of boarding battles where the line between madness and genius blurred. His recklessness bordered on suicidal, but his men followed with unwavering loyalty, for he embodied their rage. He did not fight to survive, he fought to terrify, and in that he succeeded. Vel'thrak crews began abandoning their posts when his insignia appeared on scanners, stories spreading of humans who fought like demons loosed from myth. Cole remained the quiet counterbalance, his mind fixed on discovery. Each autopsy and interrogation revealed patterns, stress fractures in Vel'thrak morale, vulnerabilities in their physiology, even flaws in their vaunted technology. He whispered his findings to Hale, arming him not just with weapons but with understanding. "They are not gods," he said during one long night at the strategy table. "They are predators who never learned how to bleed." The culmination of these battles came at the defense of a fuel depot hidden within an asteroid cluster. Outnumbered 3-1, Hale ordered the fleet to scatter, drawing the enemy deeper into the rocks. Ward's raiders lured ships into choke points mined with explosive charges. Cole directed the release of chemical agents that corroded Vel'thrak armor, turning their strength against them. The engagement ended not with retreat but with the Dominion's fleet in ruins, their wreckage lighting the void like pyres. Humanity's losses were heavy, yet the message was unmistakable: they could not be broken. When the smoke cleared, Hale stood at the viewing pane of the Resolute, his reflection etched against the wreckage of Predator ships. "They thought us prey," he murmured almost to himself. "But prey do not turn the hunt." Word of the battle spread faster than fire, carried by smugglers and slaves, whispered in corners of conquered worlds. For the first time in generations, the galaxy spoke of resistance with hope rather than despair. The Dominion still held the stars, but their invincibility was cracked, and through that crack light poured. In the silence that followed, Hale knew the war was far from won. The Vel'thrak would come again in greater force, with vengeance carved into every claw. Yet humanity had already altered the balance. They had proven they could fight. They had proven they could win. And in proving it, they had awakened something the Predators had never accounted for: an enemy that refused to know its place. The next battle was already looming, darker and deadlier than before. Hale felt it pressing on the horizon like the weight of a storm. And yet, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the grief for the fallen, there was a fire that would not die. Humanity had bared its fangs, and the galaxy would never see them as prey again. The Dominion gathered its fury into a single blow, an armada vast enough to blot constellations from the void. High Warlord Krass there stood upon the command throne of his flagship, the Bloodfang, his claws tightening around the haft of his war axe. No longer did he sneer at whispers of humans, now he seethed with obsession. What had begun as annoyance had become humiliation, and humiliation demanded blood. The Vel'thrak fleet moved as a black tide, each ship bristling with weapons, every warrior eager to erase the insult of resistance. For the first time in his reign, Krass there felt the cold edge of desperation gnawing beneath his pride. Across the Gulf of Stars, Marcus Hale prepared with grim resolve. The Resolute, battered but unbroken, led a coalition of vessels forged in defiance, captured warships grafted to freighters, mining haulers reforged into gun platforms, and ragged fleets bound not by empire but by a single purpose. Humanity had never sought conquest, survival had been enough. Yet now, survival demanded victory. Hale's face was drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes carried a clarity that could not be dimmed. He knew the final battle would decide more than a colony's fate. It would decide whether humanity endured as a species or was erased from the stars. Elias Ward stood ready within the hangar of his assault shuttle, his men strapping into harnesses with practiced haste. The mad dog of Terra lived for moments like these, when the line between courage and madness vanished. His laughter rang harsh but steady, a counterpoint to the fear he knew his soldiers felt. "One more dance with the monsters," he told them, gripping his axe, a crude blade magnetized for boarding combat. "Let's show them prey bites hardest when cornered." His recklessness was no longer mere bravado, it had become legend, a rallying point for every man who fought beside him. Doctor Adrian Cole worked in the medbay turned laboratory, finalizing his most dangerous contribution yet. From the fragments of Vel'thrak biology, he had engineered a nerve agent designed not to kill indiscriminately, but to exploit their unique physiology. It would not end the battle, but it could unmake the Predator's confidence from within. His hands trembled, not from fear but from the weight of consequence. "If this fails they will call me Butcher," he confessed when Hale visited. "If it succeeds they will call me Savior. Either way, I will carry the blood." Hale's answer was steady: "History will judge. Right now humanity needs every weapon." The battle erupted at the edge of a dying star. Hale had chosen the battlefield deliberately, a place where gravity and radiation could be wielded like knives. The Vel'thrak armada advanced in formation, vast and disciplined, while the human fleet scattered into fractured groups, feigning weakness. It was chaos by design. Asteroids seeded with explosives detonated among the Dominion's vanguard. Jury-rigged vessels struck like hornets, luring warships into crossfire. And in the heart of it, Ward's shuttle tore through the void, hooks and breaching charges ready, a spear aimed at the Bloodfang. Krass there roared commands, his voice shaking the very walls of his flagship. He had expected defiance, but not this storm of ingenuity, this refusal to bow to inevitability. Yet still he believed in brute force. "Crush them," he thundered. "Erase their name from the stars." But as explosions blossomed across his fleet, as human vessels struck and vanished, he felt something new coil in his chest: doubt. Ward's boarding team breached the Bloodfang in a storm of fire and steel. The corridors rang with human war cries as they carved through alien defenders, each step dragging them closer to the command deck. Ward fought like a demon unleashed, his axe flashing crimson in the dim light. Yet even he knew the price. When the blast doors loomed ahead, reinforced and sealed, he turned to his men with that wild grin one last time. "Open the way," he said, detonating the charges himself. The explosion consumed him, tearing the doors apart and leaving a path open for the survivors. His sacrifice carved the way forward, his legend sealed in flame. Hale entered the breach, rifle in hand, every step fueled by the memory of Ward's reckless courage. The command deck loomed vast, and at its center stood Krasthar, towering, armored, his war axe gleaming. Their gazes locked, predator and prey, though the distinction no longer held meaning. Around them, battle raged, but in that moment the war narrowed to two figures bound by inevitability. The clash was brutal, steel against claw, strength against endurance. Krasthar fought with the fury of a warlord who had never known defeat, each swing of his axe a storm. Hale answered with precision, every strike measured, every movement forged from years of survival. He bled but he did not falter. When Krasthar's arrogance left his flank exposed, Hale drove his blade deep, wrenching the weapon free with a cry that echoed across the chamber. The warlord staggered, disbelief twisting his features. "You called us prey," Hale said through ragged breath. "But prey do not end kings." With one final strike he ended Krasthar's reign. The warlord fell, the weight of his body shaking the deck, his blood spilling across the throne he had thought eternal. As the Dominion fleet reeled, Cole released his nerve agent through the captured comms, spreading it across Vel'thrak ships. Warriors who had never known fear faltered, their bodies betraying them, their will unraveling. In the chaos, the human fleet pressed its advantage, driving the armada into disarray. Victory did not come cleanly, men died, ships burned, but when the smoke cleared, it was humanity that remained standing. Chronicler Rasven, taken alive among the survivors, stared at Hale with a gaze stripped of arrogance. His scroll lay broken, yet his voice was steady when he spoke. "You are no prey. You are the predators the galaxy has always feared and never named." His words were not praise but acknowledgement, an epitaph for the Dominion and a coronation for mankind. Hale stood among the wreckage, bloodied, exhausted, yet unbroken. The cost had been unbearable, Ward's laughter silenced, ships lost, lives extinguished, but the fire endured. Humanity had not only survived, they had proven themselves a force no predator could dismiss. In the silence that followed, Hale looked into the endless dark and felt certainty settle where doubt once lived. The galaxy would never again see them as prey. It would see them as men who learned to bite back, men who had torn down the throne of predators and claimed their place among the stars. And though the war was far from over, one truth was already written in blood and fire: the era of predators had ended, and the age of humanity had begun. If this HFY story thrilled you, smash that like button and subscribe.